The living room was a quiet sanctuary of shadows, broken only by the dim glow of a single lamp casting long, muted shadows across the floor. Lily sat in a silence that was almost unnatural, her fingers idly scrolling the phone in her lap. Her face remained calm, but the white-knuckled grip on the phone betrayed the storm within. Outside, the streetlights glowed faintly through the drawn curtains, providing just enough light to catch the outline of her clenched jaw, the tension around her eyes. She'd been waiting for over an hour, a wait punctuated by the slight hum of the tracking app still open on her screen, her husband's location clear as day. Finally, she heard the front door creak open. Ben stepped inside, his face split into a casual smile as he shrugged off his coat, his eyes still glimmering with the remnants of an evening spent elsewhere. He barely noticed Lily at first, seated quietly in the shadows, until he felt her gaze intense, unyielding. The smile faded as his eyes adjusted to the dimness and locked onto hers. Without a word, she held up her phone, the screen facing him. The little red dot on the map told a story he could not talk his way out of. Ben froze, eyes darting to the phone in her hand. The expression on his face shifted quickly, a brief flash of panic, masked almost instantly by a smooth veneer of practiced charm. He exhaled slowly, casting a careful smile. "Lily," he said, his voice a studied calm. "What's this about?" Lily's eyes didn't waver, her gaze fixed on him with an unnerving intensity. The tension between them grew, thick and taut. She was done playing along, done pretending his absences didn't scrape at her heart like jagged glass. She leaned forward, holding her phone steady, letting him see it once more. "It's called honesty, Ben. That's what this is about. You said you'd be with friends. But your friends don't live across town, do they? And they certainly don't live at her address." Ben's composure cracked, if only for a split second. He reached for his coat pocket, adjusting as if the conversation were nothing more than a casual misunderstanding. "Look, Lily," he began, his tone patient, almost patronizing. "I know how it looks, but it's not what you think. I was just—" "Don't," Lily interrupted, her voice cutting through his like a sharpened blade. Her words held an edge she rarely showed, a controlled anger that left him speechless. "You know what's sad? For so long I tried to believe you. I pushed aside every gut feeling, every little voice that told me something was wrong. I made excuses for you, gave you the benefit of the doubt. But tonight, I wanted the truth. And there it was, on this screen, exactly where I knew you'd be." Ben's face fell, his words catching in his throat. She let the silence hang between them, watching him, studying every flicker of his eyes, as he searched for a way out of this corner. "All right," he murmured, his voice softer now. "Maybe I didn't handle things the best way. But Lily, I didn't want to hurt you. I thought if I could just—" "Hurt me?" Her laugh was short, bitter. She met his eyes with a look that made him shift uncomfortably. "This isn't about hurting me, Ben. This is about you, about whatever empty thing you're looking for out there. I don't need you to apologize, and I don't need your excuses. What I need," she continued, her voice steady, "is to finally stop letting you pull me along like a fool." She leaned back, her posture relaxed yet resolute. "I'm not here to argue, and I'm not here to hear why you did it. That's your burden to carry now, not mine. I just want you to see what you've destroyed." Ben's face was a mix of shock and desperation. He opened his mouth to speak but found himself at a loss for words. For the first time, he seemed to understand that this was not a fight he could win with charm or rationalizations. Lily gave him one last look, then rose from her seat, her phone still in hand. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice low but firm, "we'll figure out the practical details. But tonight you can have the couch. Enjoy the silence." Without another word, she walked away, leaving him standing alone in the dim room, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. He reached out a hand as if to stop her, but she didn't look back. The door clicked softly as she disappeared into the bedroom, the finality of it resounding through the quiet house. Ben stood alone in the living room, the silence pressing in around him. The room felt colder, emptier without her presence. He ran a hand over his face, the weight of her words heavy on his chest. She hadn't yelled, hadn't thrown things, hadn't even shed a tear in front of him, and somehow that made it worse. She had faced him with a calm he hadn't expected, with a kind of quiet resolve that left no room for his usual excuses. He dropped onto the couch, his mind churning. She knew. He tried to dismiss her suspicion, the occasional probing questions, thinking he could smooth things over, keep his two lives separate. But now, everything was crashing down around him, and there was no hiding from it. He glanced toward the closed bedroom door, the space that was once theirs, now locked to him. Ben felt the prickling edges of panic, his mind racing back to moments he'd pushed aside. The subtle, almost imperceptible changes in her. She had grown quieter, more guarded in recent weeks. But he hadn't thought much of it, too consumed with the thrill of his double life. Now, that thrill felt hollow. What had once seemed exciting now felt like a weight, an itch he'd scratched without thought for the consequences. He buried his face in his hands, regret beginning to seep in, dark and cold, spreading slowly as he sat alone. Meanwhile, on the other side of the door, Lily sat on the edge of the bed, breathing deeply to steady herself. Her fingers trembled slightly, the adrenaline from the confrontation still coursing through her. She let herself feel the sharp pang of betrayal, the burning anger she'd kept hidden from him. But even as she acknowledged the hurt, there was a sense of relief washing over her, a release from the weight of his lies. In the quiet of the bedroom, she let herself process the decision she'd already made. She wasn't going to stay. Not after tonight. Not after the trust that bound them had shattered. She had seen enough, endured enough quiet nights filled with empty reassurances and shadowed truths. The realization solidified within her like stone. She would leave, but she would do it on her terms, in her own time. Lily glanced around the room, her eyes resting on the framed photographs that lined the dresser, moments of their life together, captured in smiles that now seemed distant and hollow. There was one photo of the two of them at the beach, his arm wrapped around her as they laughed into the camera, carefree and oblivious. She stood up, crossed the room, and picked it up, feeling the weight of that memory in her hand. For a moment she felt a pang of something close to sorrow. But, as she set the frame down, the sorrow was replaced by a renewed determination. Turning back to the bed, she took a deep breath, planning the next steps. She would make arrangements in the morning, find her own place, speak to a lawyer. She could handle this. She'd built her life once, and she could do it again without him. From the other side of the door, Ben's voice came, tentative, breaking the silence. "Lily," he called softly, almost pleading. "Can we talk? Just let me explain." But she didn't respond. She climbed into bed, pulling the covers over her, letting the silence speak for her. He would have to face this alone tonight, just as she had faced countless empty nights waiting for him. For once she wasn't the one waiting. The hours crept by slowly, and Ben remained on the couch, wide awake, replaying the confrontation in his mind, the numbness settling deeper. He hadn't been ready for her calm. The restraint, the certainty in her voice, it unnerved him. She'd always been strong, but he'd misjudged just how much strength she possessed, assuming she'd bend, give him one more chance, or demand explanations he could manipulate. But she had asked for nothing. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, he was still seated, an unlit cigarette rolling absently between his fingers. The silence in the house was heavy, and for the first time it occurred to him how much of it was his own doing. Every night he had chosen to slip away, chasing something fleeting and shallow. He had pulled himself further from her, from the life they'd built. But seeing it fall apart now, he was finally beginning to feel the enormity of what he'd lost. The bedroom door opened, and Lily stepped out, already dressed. She didn't look at him as she moved briskly through the room, gathering her things, her handbag, keys, a few personal items she had left scattered about. The morning light highlighted her face, soft but resolute, as she walked past him without a word, heading toward the door. "Lily, wait." His voice came out rough, almost unfamiliar to him. She paused, hand on the doorknob, her posture calm but final. He swallowed, trying to find words that might bridge the widening gap. "Just let me explain. I know I messed up, but it doesn't have to be like this." Finally she turned, her expression neutral, her eyes cool and steady. "Explain?" she repeated, a slight, humorless smile on her lips. "What is there to explain, Ben? That you lied? That you kept seeing someone else behind my back? I don't need to hear it from you, I've already seen enough." He opened his mouth to respond, but she held up a hand, silencing him. "I've given you everything, Ben. Years of my life, my trust, my patience. And I was willing to believe you, to wait up, to listen to your excuses. But what I won't do," her voice hardened, "is let you keep pulling me back into a lie. I deserve better than that." Her words were like stones, heavy and unyielding, and for the first time, he realized that nothing he said would make a difference. He watched her with a growing sense of helplessness as she lowered her hand and turned back to the door, opening it slowly. "Lily," he said again, the desperation evident in his tone, "please, just don't go. Not like this." She looked back at him, her gaze softening for a brief moment. But then her expression closed off again, and she shook her head. "This is exactly how it needs to be, Ben." Her voice softened, but the edge was still there. "You've made your choices. Now I'm making mine." Without waiting for a response, she stepped out, letting the door close gently behind her. The finality of that sound echoed through the house, a quiet but powerful end. Ben stood rooted to the spot, staring at the closed door, as if willing it to swing back open. But it didn't. The quiet engulfed him, vast and unmoving, like a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. He took a few uncertain steps toward the door, his hand hovering over the handle, hesitating. What would he say if he went after her? What words were left? What apology could heal the cracks he had spent years widening? He sat back down, his mind drifting to the small moments that had filled their life together, the quiet mornings, shared laughter, the steady comfort of her presence beside him. They had built something real, something that had held him steady through life's uncertainties. And yet, he had let it slip through his fingers, drawn to the thrill of something new, something easy and unburdened. But that thrill was gone now, leaving behind only emptiness. A part of him wanted to blame her, to find fault in the routine of their lives, to justify his choices. But as he sat there, he realized that she had been there all along, open and steadfast, trusting him even when she had every reason not to. And he had taken that trust and twisted it, leading her into his web of excuses and half-truths. The quiet ache of regret began to throb in his chest, pulsing deeper with each memory. He slumped back, trying to ignore the uncomfortable truths swirling in his mind. But one thought cut through the noise, clear and undeniable: she was gone. She had reached her breaking point, and he had been too blind to see it coming. Hours passed as he sat in that silence, the light outside shifting slowly. He replayed their last conversation over and over, hoping for some angle, some thread he could pull to unravel her decision. He wished she had yelled, demanded answers, anything that would give him a way back in. Instead, she had left with a resolve that told him, without a doubt, that she would not return. The day slipped into late afternoon when he finally moved, standing and heading to the bedroom. He paused just outside the door, his heart sinking as he stepped inside. The room was painfully empty. Her side of the bed was neatly made, her belongings carefully removed. It felt stripped, hollow, a reflection of what he had done to their life together. He moved toward the dresser, his eyes landing on the framed photos she had left behind. One in particular caught his eye, the beach photo with both of them beaming into the camera, her arms wrapped around him as if she could hold him close enough to keep him there forever. His fingers trembled as he picked up the frame, tracing the edges of the photo. They had been happy, hadn't they? He told himself that happiness was enough, that a few lies here and there wouldn't tarnish what they had. But staring at her bright smile, he felt the full weight of his actions sink in. Every moment she had trusted him, every time she had chosen to believe his stories, came rushing back, each one adding another layer to the regret clawing at him. The sudden vibration of his phone pulled him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen, his heart stuttering as he saw Julia's name flash across it. He almost answered, his thumb hovering over the screen, but something inside him twisted, a sick realization taking root. What could she offer him now? He had thought she was excitement, freedom. Now all he felt was an ache, a sense that he had traded something priceless for something temporary and hollow. He let the call go to voicemail, watching the screen dim and fade as the phone fell silent. The house remained still around him, bearing witness to the choices he had made, the fractures he had inflicted on his own life. He wandered back to the living room, his gaze landing on the spot where she had stood the night before, holding her phone out to him, confronting him with his own truth. It felt like a lifetime ago, and yet the pain of it was sharp, fresh, and relentless. By evening, he found himself sitting on the edge of their bed, the emptiness pressing down like a weight. He had been given everything: love, trust, companionship, and he had thrown it away, convinced he could have it all without consequence. But now, as he sat alone, he understood that she had been his anchor, the steady presence that had grounded him. Without her, he was adrift, left to reckon with a life he had sabotaged in his pursuit of something fleeting. In the silence, he admitted it to himself: he had lost her. There was no fixing this, no going back. The words she had left him with echoed in his mind: you've made your choices. Now I'm making mine. He realized now that her calm wasn't just anger held back, it was resolve, the strength of a woman who had finally chosen herself over him. The last of the sunlight faded, casting the room in shadow. He lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of his decisions settle over him. And as the night deepened, he let the silence swallow him whole, understanding that he would have to face every moment of it alone.